Good morning, children. Today we are going to discuss about types of forces. There are five common types of forces which we notice in our everyday life. These are number one, muscular force, frictional force, or which is also called friction, magnetic force, electrostatic force, and gravitational force. All type of forces can be divided into two main groups. These are contact forces and non-contact forces. Let us start first contact forces. A force which can be exerted by an object on another object only through physical touching is called a contact force. The examples of contact forces are: suppose a book is lying on a table. To lift this book from the table, some force is required. When we lift this book from the table by hand, the force is exerted by the muscles of our arm. Similarly, when we kick a football, the force is exerted by the muscles of our leg. So, the force exerted by the muscles of the body is called muscular force. Children, do you know the muscular force also acts inside our body? How? As we know, various functions required for our survival. For example, in the process of digestion, it is the muscular force which pushes the food through the alimentary canal. The expansion and contraction of lungs when we inhale and exhale air during breathing also involves muscular force. Since muscular force can be applied to an object only when our body is in contact with the object, therefore, muscular force is a contact force. Second is frictional force or friction. Children, I will explain you this. By an example, a ball moving on the ground slows down gradually and stops after covering some distance. We know that a force is required to stop a moving body. This means that a force is exerted by the ground on the moving ball which opposes its motion and brings it to a stop. This force which opposes the motion of ball on the ground is known as a frictional force. So what we can say, the force which always opposes the motion of one body over another body is called frictional force or friction. The frictional force acts between the two surfaces which are always in contact with each other. It is not necessary that the agent applying a force on an object should always be in contact with it. There are some forces which act on an object even from a distance. We will now discuss such non-contact forces. A force which can be exerted by an object on another object even from a distance without touching each other is called a non-contact force. There is no physical contact between the object which exerts the force and the object on which force is exerted. The examples of non contact forces are: number one, a magnet attracts things made up of iron or steel. So, if we bring a magnet near iron nails or pins, the magnet pulls them towards it. Since the iron nails and pins move towards the magnet, it means that the magnet exerts a force on them. So we can say the force exerted by a magnet is called magnetic force. The magnetic force acts even from a distance. The magnet exerts a magnetic force on objects made up of iron, steel, nickel, and cobalt. It does not exert a force on objects made of copper, wood, or glass. When we bring a magnet slowly near some iron pins, then at a certain small distance, the iron pins suddenly jump towards the magnet and stick to it, even when the magnet has not touched them. Since a magnet can exert its magnetic force on iron objects from a distance, therefore we can say that magnetic force is a non contact force. A magnet also exerts a magnetic force on another magnet placed near it, but the magnetic force between two magnets placed near one another can be that of attraction or repulsion, depending upon which poles of the two magnets are facing one another. The magnetic force is widely used in our everyday life. For example, many toys work due to the magnetic force exerted by magnets fixed inside them. The magnetic strips help to keep the refrigerator door closed tightly. Certain stickers stick to the iron objects like steel, almirah, refrigerator, etc. without any glue. Such stickers contain tiny magnets and hence stick to the iron object due to magnetic force. Before we go further, the study electrostatic force, we should know the meaning of the terms like electric charge, electrostatic, and electrically charged object. The electric charges are of two types, that is positive electric charges and negative electric charges. Electric charges can be produced by friction when one object is rubbed over another object. The term electrostatic refers to stationary electric charges. An object having stationary electric charges or static electric charges on it is called electrically charged object. A comb is said to have acquired electrostatic charge after it has been rubbed with dry hair. Such a comb is an example of charged object. An electrically charged object exerts an electrostatic force. An electrostatic force is actually an electrical force. It is called electrostatic force because the electric charges involved in it. So, the force exerted by an electrically charged object is called electrostatic force. Children, when we take a plastic comb and rub it in our dry hair for about 1 minute, then bring the comb near the tiny pieces of paper, we will find that this comb attracts the tiny pieces of paper. The tiny pieces of paper move towards the comb and stick to it. This can be explained like this. When the plastic comb is rubbed in dry hair, the comb gets electric charges by friction. And when this electrically charged comb is brought near the tiny pieces of paper, it exerts an electrostatic force of attraction on them. Due to this electrostatic force, the tiny pieces of paper move towards the comb and stick to it. Thus, what we can say, the movement of tiny pieces of paper is due to the electrostatic force exerted by electric charges acquired by the comb on rubbing in hair. It is the electrostatic force which is responsible for raising our body hair when we try to take off a terraline or polyester shirt in dry weather. If an inflated balloon is rubbed with a piece of synthetic cloth, it may be polyester or nylon, and then pressed against a wall, then what would happen? The balloon sticks to the wall. It is the electrostatic force which is responsible for the attraction between the balloon and the wall. You will be surprised to know that electrostatic force is utilized in reducing air pollution. How? By removing dust, soot, and fly ash particles from the smoke coming out of the chimneys of factories. Sir Isaac Newton said that every object in this universe pulls every other object with a certain force. The pull exerted by objects possessing mass is called gravitational force. The gravitational force between two objects is a force of attraction, and it acts even if the two objects are not connected by any means. It is the gravitational force between the sun and the earth which holds the earth on its orbit around the sun. And it is the gravitational force between earth and the moon which holds the moon in its orbit around the earth. If we drop a stone from some height, it always falls down towards the earth. Why? This is because the earth exerts a gravitational force of attraction on the stone and pulls it down. In fact, the earth pulls all the objects towards the center. The force with the earth pulls the objects towards it is called a force of gravity, or just we can say gravity. The force of gravity causes all the objects to fall towards the earth. For example, a leaf falls from the tree due to gravity. A fruit also falls down from a tree due to the force of gravity. Rain falls down to earth due to the force of gravity. When we open a tap, water begins to flow down towards the ground due to the force of gravity. When a coin slips from our hand, it falls to the ground due to the force of gravity acting on it. The gravitational force of earth or gravity acts on object from a distance without there being a physical context. So we can say that gravitational force or gravity is an example of non-contact forces. That's all for today's video, children. Thank you and have a wonderful day.